You heard it here first. Then Newsweek, The Daily Beast, Mediaite, Huffington Post, and our partners at The Hill all picked up our reporting last night about Senator Cory Booker. His 25-hour and 4-minute speech prompted pollster guru Frank Luntz to make a 2028 prediction on our show last night.
What I saw over the last 25 hours absolutely blew me away. And just as you sometimes make projections or predictions, I'm going to do one right here. That speech puts Cory Booker as one of the leaders for the Democratic Party, 2028.
Today, NBC, among others, said Booker proved he was the fighter Democrats need.
He promised to lower your grocery prices, they're higher. He promised, I'll be a better steward of the economy. It's worse than we inherited. Over and over, he's breaking promises and doing outrageous things like disappearing people off of American streets. Do we see what's happening? How much is enough?
With us now, Mehdi Hasan, CEO, editor-in-chief of the new media company Zeteo. He's also a columnist for The Guardian, former host on MSNBC. Mehdi Hasan, good to see you. I said earlier on Twitter, one of your favorite platforms, I promised, I'm not smart enough to argue with you, so I'm not going to. I'm looking here for your insights. Is everybody getting a little too high on Cory Booker right now?
Probably. And I say that not because Cory Booker hasn't done something pretty astonishing and impressive this week. I mean, he broke a record. He's going to go down in history, whatever we think of him, whatever you like him or hate him. He's broken a record. What he did was impressive. He didn't just do 25 hours and 5 minutes of speaking on the Senate floor and not go to the toilet once, but he spoke with substance, right? He spoke with eloquence. He spoke at times without any note. So as someone who studies rhetoric, I was very impressed. But the reason I say I agree with you that people are getting high on this is we're not even at 100 days, Leland, right? Trump's first term is not even 100 days old. Let's calm down. You know, Trump years are like dog years. You just can't get a sense of time. The idea that we know what's going to happen in July of this year or November of this year, let alone November of 2028, is insane. Right? Things are changing very fast. And by the way, Booker was a strong candidate in 2020, but didn't go anywhere. So the Democratic primaries have always kind of thrown a lot of people off at times.
Okay, fair enough. This is what I heard a lot from Cory Booker, and I understand why Democrats are angry and upset and worried. A lot of people in America are. But he spent almost the entire amount of time complaining about Donald Trump and very little time offering anything new. I have a lot of Republican friends who, when we did the interview last night with Frank Luntz, were giddy at the idea of the Republican nominee in 2028. It's not going to be Donald Trump. Let's not go down that road. Running against Cory Booker because they said he's going to be really easy to beat. Does Booker need and Democrats need to offer something different?
It's a couple of things. Obviously, it doesn't really matter what Republicans are saying now about who they want to beat. Every party says about the candidate they either like, or oh, he's going to be easy to beat or not easy to beat. That's kind of the way politics is done. What I would say, and I know you didn't want to have an argument, but I will push back on one thing you said. I do think we have to talk about Donald Trump in 2028. He just went on Meet the Press and told Kristen Welker what a lot of us have been warning about for many months now, which is he has no intention of just quietly receding into the darkness in 2028, going off to play even more golf than he currently does. He wants to stick around, whether that means running for president again, doing this ridiculous plan where he runs on a ticket with Vance and then Vance hands over, or canceling elections, which is the real extreme scenario.
Let me just go with
extreme scenario. But the idea that Donald Trump is disappearing from the scene, for you to say that so casually, I think people have been proved wrong again and again. When I said in 2019 he wouldn't leave peacefully in 2020, people laughed at me. Unfortunately, I was vindicated in the worst way.
Okay. I think Donald Trump's trolling everybody and getting the left to freak out over something that's not going to happen. You think otherwise, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
There seems to be this desire inside the Democratic Party to rationalize away why Donald Trump won and Kamala Harris lost. There's all these books coming out about Joe Biden and how he covered it up and how everybody did everything. Fine. And part of these books now is rationalizing why Kamala Harris lost. Take a listen.
President Obama absolutely did not think that Joe Biden should continue, according to our sources close to President Obama. And he also didn't want Kamala Harris to be the replacement for Biden. He didn't think that she was the best choice for Democrats. And he worked really behind the scenes for a long time to try to have a mini primary or an open convention, or a mini primary leading to an open convention. He was really working against her.
This isn't a game of Clue. This isn't, the professor in the library with a candlestick. Why is it so difficult for Democrats to say Kamala Harris was a terrible candidate? It was an unpopular message. Donald Trump connected with working class voters that Democrats abandoned. We need to change.
So to be fair to Cory Booker, he was self-critical. There was one of his viral moments from that 25 hours was talking about how he wanted to talk about how he'd made mistakes, how the party had made mistakes. I think that's right. People do want to hear that from a party that loses an election. On Obama, I think there's a real problem with this narrative. If Jonathan Allen, a former colleague of mine who I respect, if he's right with his sources, and I have no reason to believe otherwise, that Obama didn't want Biden and didn't want Harris, then why didn't he push Biden out of the race much earlier? The reason we had Harris, and people like me said we've got to go with Harris, simply because it wasn't practical to have a mini primary open convention at that late stage in July, August. Remember, in June last year, Leland, Obama joined Biden for a record-breaking fundraiser in LA. That was a month before Biden stepped aside. What the hell was Obama doing? I think everyone at the top of the Democratic Party who was associated with the decision to keep Biden in the race should be drummed out of Democratic Party politics forever.
Okay, that going to happen?
No, because Democrats never take accountability and the elites get away with everything. Chuck Schumer is still leader of the Senate. If you lose an election, right? I'm from the UK originally. Traditionally in the UK, a party leader loses an election, they step aside. Chuck Schumer lost the majority in the Senate. He should step aside. Why is he still the minority leader?
Well, because he controls the purse strings would be my answer, and he's worried about a primary from AOC. Here he is saying essentially that last night when a Democrat won in Wisconsin, the Supreme Court seat, that this is now the beginning of the Democratic comeback. Chuck Schumer.
Look at what happened in Wisconsin yesterday. The American people understand that Trump is not on their side. The American people are seeing how bad Trump is, and they are not supporting people like Elon Musk and those who support Donald Trump.
Again, a little bit too much wishful thinking?
Well, certainly the Democrats didn't win in Wisconsin because of Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer had nothing to do with that victory. That victory was to do with the Wisconsin Democratic Party. People like Ben Wickler, the chair, who's a fantastic organizer and campaigner, lost out for the DNC chair. And it had to do with Elon Musk. Let's not forget that it's always good to have a villain and an opponent and have someone to blame. And it's great news that Republicans are tying themselves to Elon Musk, a man as unpopular as Donald Trump. Great. I mean, Trump and Musk are great people to run against, and Democrats should run against them. Every time they run against Trump and Musk, with the exception of last year, although midterms, they did very well, if you remember, in the Trump first term, you need a villain. Republicans are the masters of creating villains, people to blame, people to point at, people to hate. Democrats are not. And therefore, if Musk and Trump volunteer themselves as villains, great, take it.
Yeah, look, getting people angry turns people out. You make a great point, getting Ben Wickler on the show, something that we've tried to make a priority. You speak to so many Democrats. When you think about their head right now, is there a realization that you can't beat somebody, which is sort of whatever MAGA is, with nobody? How do they find a leader?
So it is the $64,000 question, and I think you're seeing the left put forward people, you're seeing centrists put forward people. Cory Booker is clearly going to be a candidate, but fundamentally, it doesn't really matter. The 2028 runners and riders are irrelevant to the here and now. In the here and now, Donald Trump is tearing apart the constitutional fabric, democratic values, changing the laws, demonizing judges, ending foreign alliances, wrecking the economy. That needs to be dealt with in the here and now, and that requires a Democratic Party.
Can you deal with that without? We'll agree to disagree on what exactly the terminology for what he's doing is, but can you have that fight while Democrats are fighting amongst themselves?
Yes, if you can actually have people who come forward and take risks. The beauty of what Cory Booker did and the beauty of what Bernie Sanders and AOC have done is that they haven't bothered to get involved in those fights. They're like, whatever everyone else is doing, who cares? We're, to quote Nike, we're just going to go just do it, right? So he just went out there and said, I'm going to do this for 25 hours. Bernie just said, all right, I'm going to go on an oligarchy tour. And people are like, you shouldn't say the word oligarchy. Well, he went out and got tens of thousands of people turned up. So it's Democrats want to see people doing stuff, standing up, not rolling over, not surrendering, not capitulating. Anything, literally anything, rather than nothing.
That's a good point. Just do something is oftentimes the best solution. Mehdi Hasan, first time we've had you on the program. It will not be our last. We're really glad to have you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.